Things haven't gone exactly perfect since we started traveling here from Montana, and since I wear a suit jacket about as often as I use a microphone, I expect this is just going to be fantastic. Last night we have all these friends that are coming to visit, and they've been coming in one after another, and I thought we were finally done at 1 a.m. and I could get some sleep. And so at 2:30 in the morning, I'm laying there. I think I really wish I could sleep when the smoke alarm started going off, just raging through the thing. And there's this robot voice saying, "Fire, fire, fire, fire." Ruthane comes over and says, "Paul, we gotta get out of bed. There's a fire." It's like, I don't smell any smoke. I'm not getting out of bed. So Ruthane's panicking. Every 5 minutes she's coming and trying to get me out of bed. Of course, I'm not leaving out of bed. I just refuse to. And then I have all these friends and family from all around. So the next thing I know, I hear this little creeping sound, and I pull the blanket. I say I had 2 pillows around my head because the alarms wouldn't stop ringing. So I put the one pillow just to the side, and I could see, and there's this lady standing there with this long, flowing blonde hair, dressed as a firefighter. And the first thing I could think is, what do these guys have been setting me up for this whole time? I didn't trust any of these people. Was there ever a fire? And why would my wife be in on this? I want to thank Mike Valla. What he said was great, although there was a lot of inaccuracies. Mike is an amazing author. He's written some of my favorite books that have ever been written in fly fishing. I got to be close to the daddies of my own. Mike, of course, grew up there as a homeless child. Well, we sort of missed each other in our times with the daddies. So I didn't know Mike until, like Mike said, and this part's true, Mike. Then our editor, Jay Nichols, said we should talk. And so Mike gives me a call, and I'm running a fly shop. And I've written one of my books, so Mike wants to have some advice about writing a book. So I tell him, back then the fly fishing bulletin boards were a big thing. Everybody get there on time. I was like, Mike, don't get on those fly fishing bulletin boards. It's nothing but anger and people writing all kinds of stuff. And I said, I don't like going to the shows, Mike. Don't do the shows. Don't do any of that. And everything I told him, like 5 minutes later, I see he's headlining like 9 shows. Every bulletin board he's on there, Mike Valla 56 at Hungry Lover or whatever. I don't know what he's on every single one of these things. So, but thank you, Mike. Thank you for everything. Thank you for the beautiful words you said. It means a lot to me. I also want to thank my fellow inductees, Adriano. Congratulate you guys. Remember, I'm on like 4 hours of sleep, so I smoke a lot of gin. Of course, Bud Lilly and Isaac Walton and Will Carpenter. And I want to thank the Catskill Museum and the Hall of Fame Selection Committee. I really appreciate all this. I really never imagined this day would occur. This is going to be, I guess, my 28th year in the fly fishing industry or business in one way or another. And I get emails all the time from people that want to start a fly shop or they want to do this in some way. And they always like, what do you have to do? And I'm like, start with a strong hatred of money. A desire to drive elderly cars. But that's not exactly how Ruthanne and I started in this. I was a counselor in a public school. I was really bad. You gotta figure that those children I was counseling, they're adults now. If you wondered why the world is so messed up, I helped raise this generation. So with all my wisdom, but it was really nice. It was Logan Elementary School in Tyrone. The Little Juniata River was right down the road. So if sulfurs were hatching on the river, I figured the kids are probably okay today. Shoot out there and go fishing. So I was doing that for a few years, and there was this magazine, Fly Fish America magazine, where it would be free. You could get in the fly shops. And Pharaoh Allen had a column in there, and he was like looking for fly submissions for people to write. So Ruthane and I lived on this little creek, Clearfield Creek. and I sent in this little caddis pattern I tied. It's called the Clearfield Caddis. And I get 6 months later, I get a letter from Pharaoh Allen. He's putting it in a magazine, and I think my whole life is made. This is the greatest thing that's ever going to happen to me ever, and I just love that thing. I think I wept openly for a week. I don't know. But in the back of that magazine, there was a little tiny ad, and it said, "Looking for an opportunity. We're looking for a husband and wife to run a fly shop and lodge in the Catskill Mountains of New York." I said, "Ruth Ann, this is pretty interesting." And we did nothing with this for about a month, and eventually we put together a resume. I can't imagine what was on it. I mean, but whatever. So West Branch Anglers contacts us and say, "Sure, we're going to give you an interview at one of the fly fishing shows in Maryland. So we want you to drive down and run our booth with the fishing guides in Maryland." And so I'm like, "All right, let's go do that. We'll do that." So Ruth Ann and I drive down to Maryland, and when you get in it, there's this giant show going on, and there's this map in the very front that shows the booths of where each of these outfitters are, and I'm looking, West Branch Anglers, and I don't see it. It's not listed on there. And this goes back to something you said earlier about anybody who doesn't know who Lefty Cray is. I'm going to tell you about somebody who didn't. So Ruth Ann looks at me and goes, "Hey, that's that Craigie guy. The Craigie guy's over there." And I was like, "That's Lefty. What? I didn't know Lefty was going to be at that show." It was then that it dawned on us that we drove to the wrong show in Maryland. The first of many great decisions I've made in this business. So we had to drive across to the other side of Maryland somewhere, and we finally make it into the show, and they put us in there, and I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm terrible at this stuff, and I've never run a cash register, and we're checking these people out and everything. And at the end of the night, at the end of the weekend, old Harry Bachelet says, "I want to offer you guys a job." I was like, "Wow." So Ruth Ann and I go up to the hotel on our last night, and at the exact same time, I said, "So what do you think?" And at the exact same time, I looked at her and said, "Yes." She said, "Absolutely not." But somehow we worked it out, and friends of mine would later tell me that the guys sat around the bar that night taking bets on how long we would last. So, but somehow we've lasted in one way or another for 28 years. I have some notes here, but I'm about half blind, and I left Monty's glasses over there, so we're going to roll with it on this. I want to thank my dad. It was my dad that got me started in fly fishing and fly tying. The simple fact that I'm standing here today with being taught by somebody who's been so terrible at this for his whole life is pretty amazing. I'm just kidding. So my dad would tie these marabou streamers, and he taught me how to tie these things. And the first thing, little Bell's Gap run, this little tributary, I would take them out there and catch these fish. But my dad and I weren't very good at this, so we would take spinning rods to most places. And if everybody left the stream, then we'd go get the fly rods, because we don't want anybody to watch. Laughing at you. So, but I certainly wouldn't have had my life in fly fishing and any of this stuff without you, Dad. So, thank you very much for all that, and for all the time we spent together streamside. It means a lot, and certainly part of the reason I'm here today. So, thank you for that. I see so many people here that have been friends and that I've known for over the years. I want to thank all of you. Ruth Ann and I have been to the Catskills in central Pennsylvania and now Montana, but each of those places we've met people that have become like family, that have been part of our lives and have changed us for the better all along the road. And I see so many of you sitting out there today, and And I just want to thank you all for your support and for everything you've done for us and the way you've encouraged us over the years. I'm lucky. I had my 2 biological parents, but in the sport of fly fishing, I also got to have 2 adoptive parents, and they would be Charlie Mack and Mary Detty, and they had an oversized impact on my life. I first met Charlie when I was a counselor. In the summertime, the kids weren't in school, so I could take them places, and I would take them to these brush-choked streams I really wanted to fly fish, and they'd be hung up in the trees, but it would free me up for time to cast. and I really liked that. And on one of those little streams, Charlie came busting out of the underbrush. And with Walt's family here, I have to think of, some of you have read Charlie's books, and you probably heard this story, but I have to think of my favorite Charlie and Walt Carpenter story. They're both members of the Spruce Creek Rod and Gun Club, and Charlie would take me there. And Charlie told me this, and I wish he was here to hear this, and Charlie's in the Hall of Fame too here. And so he'd be snorting and laughing like he always did. But Charlie tells me he wakes up at the Rod and Gun Club, and he puts on his glasses and gets dressed, and he starts walking downstairs, and he says he doesn't feel right. He said he thinks something's wrong. And he sort of stumbles a little bit, and he says, oh my God, I think I'm having a heart attack. Maybe I'm having a stroke. Charlie opens the door to go outside to get some air, and he falls down the stairs in the front of the Rod and Gun Club. And he said it was right then at that moment that Walt Carpenter came running over and said, "Charlie, I think you're wearing my glasses." Charlie survived that day and many more. But it was Charlie at the fly fishing shows that first walked John Randolph and the editors of Fly Fisher magazine to meet me. Charlie was one of my biggest supporters and one of my closest friends my whole adult life, really, and I can't tell you how important he was to me. Mary was the same. I loved Mary Detty. From the time I always dreamt of tying in the Detty Fly Shop. That's like, you're not a good tyer unless you can make it in the Detty Fly. Like, that's just the best of the best. And I was so nervous, and I walk in there and I want to show Mary some flies because I want to be able to tie for her shop. And she was just so kind and sweet. And then she takes those flies, this sweet lady, and she's like, "Well, the hack's a little long and the wings aren't exactly angled right." And she immediately she's just like a perfectionist, awesome Mary. I loved her. And anytime over the years, I would have questions, like with the Dettys trying to tie all their flies in the United States, is it immoral for me to have my flies knocked off by a company and tied overseas? And Mary would say, "Oh, Paul, in this business, make any cent you can, any way you can." So she never cared about any of that stuff. And Mary and her husband, Gene, and Ruth Ann and I got to be such good friends with her. And of course, it led to us meeting Joe Fox and Kelly, who are also like family now. And I certainly wouldn't have been here without Charlie and Mary and their guidance and their patience with me and listening to stupid questions and just doing their best to help me every step of the way. Lastly, one of the only things that Mr. Valla said that was actually entirely true involves my wife, Ruth Ann. I call my wife the keeper of all knowledge because, quite frankly, I'm an idiot. I think I most likely would be living in a cardboard box in a knapweed at Junction Pole had we never been married. I think that's as close as I've ever would have gotten. Ruth Ann has been my biggest cheerleader, my biggest supporter. She reads my stories and tells me what she likes and what she doesn't. She reads my books. For a long time, she gave me health insurance. Nothing wrong with that, right? It's funny too. So poor Ruth Ann, we're trying to take these photos for these books and magazine articles that I've written and done, and I'm very tough on Ruth Ann. Like, you're holding this wrong, the light's wrong, and whatever. So I'd always dreamt of being on the cover of Fly Fisherman magazine. And this past June, that happened. They ran out of other people in their and Ruth Ann took that photo. So now for the rest of my life, I'm never going to be able to be critical of any of her photography because she is the photographer who took that picture. But she's been my constant partner for all these years, and I certainly would not be here tonight without you. So.